Welcome to How We Grow, an essential playbook to grow and scale your vacation rental business with advice and insights from the best in the biz, with your host, Lynell Gordon. Welcome to How We Grow, the Vacation Rental Show. I have a really important visitor today. Excited to have Chris Wheeler on today. He is the owner of a company called Scenic Stays. You have to correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding.
Yeah.
There you go. And Chris is a little unique in our industry in that he has educational background that relates to what he's doing, as well as lots and lots of experience. And he is well known in the industry for having data-driven decision-making that he does. And it's really unique, Chris, to hear you talk. So please tell me your passion in this industry and the types of things that you think that other people could use.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple of things I would say I'm passionate about. One is, as you mentioned, just using data as much as possible to make decisions, because there's so much information that we can gather about what we do, not just from a rates and a revenue standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint, or even operationally about what we're doing with housekeeping and maintenance. There's so much information now that we can collect and use to make better and more well-informed decisions. And I think that's something that's been really fun and exciting and cool to see, especially here recently. And it's a really great way to have some accountability, but to also track and measure how well you're doing things. It's just really exciting to me to see how much you can track and how much you can learn about what's going on just from the data behind all of your operations, your revenue, your marketing too. And so I'm really passionate about that. I really get excited and fired up about just simple bookings and revenue. And it's not always the big summertime peak booking that I get excited about. It's a 3-night booking in the middle of November right now when it's all peak.
Exactly.
It gets me excited. So I love that. And I love working with people and the team. Just the team aspect's amazing. That's what's been really fun to see since, doing it with just 1, 2 people and now having 60 plus people and amazing people that just put so much time and effort and care into things. That's just really amazing to see. And I love the experience aspect too. It's really cool to see other people and how they experience things and how much they can enjoy just the different types of properties, the different areas we represent and have the opportunity to manage. So there's a lot of things to get passionate about. There's a lot of things to enjoy, but those are some of them.
So you hit on something that is my heart. My heart is off-season rentals, especially because you're on the East Coast. I'm familiar with East Coast quite a bit because that's where my family's from. So talk to me about that 3-day Thanksgiving vacation rental. If I look at our seasonality across the US right now, we're doing okay for booking our season for our main vacation rental weeks. But the off season, we're still working on. So talk to me about the strategies that you use to book those off season rentals.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think I like it so much because it's just a little more difficult. You've got to work a little bit harder. You've got to do your research and know what your competitors are doing. You've got to know what's out there. Whereas when the demand is so high, at a certain point, it's just a little easier to book. There's more people interested. You can capture some of that demand almost accidentally. Whereas when the occupancy is lower, you've got to make sure you're in front of as many people as possible. You're as appealing as possible. And there's just a smaller group that is looking at many more properties. So you've got to be firing on all cylinders. You got to make sure your reviews are great and that people will trust you. You got to make sure your rates are good because they're not going to obviously book if everything else is more economical, but you've got to make sure you're in front of them, period. And so I think it's where you play that really fine balance between what's the best rate, what promos can I offer that are appealing, but are not going to upset my partners, my property owners, and what's going to position us best. And it's really interesting. And it's just really rewarding, exciting to see that a quick little booking come through when in the rest of the market maybe is struggling to get 50% occupancy and you get one of them. It's exciting. I love it.
I love that. That is my bottom line passion, is to be able to take a time period when we're low and create a campaign that puts the pieces in there that allows us to book those areas. So I'm going to start this a little early. Normally I talk about it later on in our show, but if there are people out there, because I'm just saying right now, it's important that we get those bookings who are looking to get those off-season bookings and they're not in direct competition with you, would you be willing to mentor them and to help them if they contact you?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Oh, that is awesome. Okay, so we'll tell you a little later on how to contact Chris. But I wanted to touch on something else you said. You talked about using your data that you're collecting for housekeeping to make it more efficient. Tell me what you're using that data for.
Yeah, so it's for efficiency, effectiveness, tracking, accountability, all the above. And so we're very fortunate to be home 24/7. It's a great tool. And so we can use that on the front end where our housekeepers and we have fantastic team members in housekeeping and maintenance where they buy in and they do this. Because that's the first, maybe biggest piece is the buy-in where they're willing to do that.
Totally.
But once they do, it's a great tool for where they check in. So you know when they've started. They complete the clean and then they check out. And then our inspectors can go in and they check in, check out. We can use pictures. We can use star rating to say how good the clean was. And we can do something similar with maintenance too. We can then take all that, put it into a quick report where over the span of a week, a month, even a year, I can see the average time it takes to clean a property. So it helps with scheduling. When it's peak season and you've got to squeeze a ton of cleans into a 6-hour time frame, we've got to be very strategic. We have to make sure our housekeepers are taken care of, that they make as much as possible in that time frame. But then we can see once we get our reports in a really good place, which I've got great people that work on that endlessly. Every week they work on it to make sure you start looking just for anomalies. This one 30 minutes less than the average clean time. Why is that? And then kind of our KPIs for how long the average clean would take, what's the star rating we're looking for. And if they fall below that, things happen, no big deal. But if there's consistency there, we've got to make a change. We've got to move some things around, work on scheduling, see where the problems are. So again, it's really cool. You got to blend that though. The data is great. You can't lose the personal piece either. You can't just look at, who your housekeeping team is and who your inspector is on a spreadsheet. You've got to also mix the blend of personal and care. But there's a lot of good information where at first it's scattered, it's all over. But once you get your KPIs and know what you're looking for in there, it's just the anomalies, the outliers. You say, what happened? Why did we miss that? Or why was that clean 3 hours longer? Or why was that clean only 30 minutes? And then the review was also bad. Well, that makes sense. They didn't take as long in the property as they should have.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here. And then I'm going to say that most housekeeping softwares today have that capability. I can't think of any of the big 3 or 4 that I'm familiar with that don't have the ability to do that. Some of them, even as it gets towards the end of the day for cleaning or closer to the check-in time, it'll start to turn red. So you know if you need to send additional staff down there. So I love the fact that you are balancing, and that's what we call it. You're balancing out your housekeeping in a way that allows you to make sure that your guests are being serviced, your housekeepers are happy, and your inspectors are doing their job. So I love the fact that you're using data to do that. We used to do that by the seat of our pants with a list where we call into the office. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And now we have the ability to literally run reports, and we can run reports now at the end of the season to see where we have trouble spots, or even at the end of the week to see where we have trouble spots if we have people that are specifically doing that. So that's another area, guys. If you're not doing that, contact Chris and take a look at how he's doing things. And if you have a housekeeping software, more than likely there are ways that you can do that. One of the things I find, Chris, and just off topic, a lot of our property managers have a lot of great software, and they're not using the capabilities. And it's not because they're lazy. It's any other reason other than the people that are working under them are so busy, they don't have time to use that. Do you find that to be an issue in your company, that people have, like, there are pieces and you're like, gosh, I wish we could use that. I wish someone could take that over.
Absolutely. Time's the greatest asset and it's the hardest commodity to come across because everyone's busy. And it's really interesting you say that too, because a lot of times, you can work for months. We'll work for months to get the reporting in place or tracking in place. It only takes a week where you take it off, you take your foot off the gas and you're done. It all just kind of goes to mayhem again. That's part of the challenge. It's so quick that you can lose track when you've put in months to try and, get something in place. And it's always the time, it's distractions, things pop up so much in our industry and you just never know. You never know what's going to happen. And so you may have the best of intentions that this is going to be when you monitor your reporting. I think what's the most effective is just to constantly keep an eye on your calendar and make sure you set aside times that are non-negotiables. Those are the times when you have to do this. And if you've got to put everything to the side for an hour so you get it done, you do it. And I think everyone struggles with it. I certainly do. It's a matter of, it's consistency and making sure you set that time up. But absolutely, there's always be more time. And that's one of the things too, I think you've got to have personally as a company. You could always do better. Everything could always be better. If you ever look back, in my opinion, and say, oh, we did this, we had a great season. We just knocked it out of the park. You're missing something. I mean, we always should have booked something better, had a higher price for a property. We always should have done a better job on a turn day. And so that's what the reporting's for. That's what the data's for, is to say, we did a great job, but we still could have done something better.
Vacation rental managers utilize LiveRes and their powerful software that goes beyond the standard. LiveRes empowers you to operate your business the way you want, while offering you powerful support and access to a community of partners and experts to grow your vacation rental business. LiveRes's industry differentiator is software plus support, community, and service, with high converting websites included to get you started. Learn more at liveres.com.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I was talking with my husband yesterday about our vacation rental property. We have put a quarter of the price of our ocean front back into it this year because our front ocean wall had failed twice, 2 years in a row. And the second year when we found it, it was damaged. The whole bottom floor had to be replaced. And they called yesterday and they're like, we're taking the trim off on the outside, or we're repainting it at the same time. May as well get it all done. And they found rot. And he's like, oh no, they're not going to be able to take the pictures. It's November and we're not going to have our pictures ready. And Nehemiah, I said, and this is something you can talk to owners. I mean, the reason I mention it is because maybe you have an owner that does, like my husband did, and said, we're not going to get our rentals. And I said, all of the base rentals, all season is rented, Nehemiah. All those pictures are for people are going to be much happier when they see the brand new house inside with all the new appliances and all the new furniture. They're going to be thrilled.
Yeah.
I said, what this is going to help us do when we get our pictures are the off-season rentals. We're really going to push for off-season rentals, and that's what we're going to do. Can you walk me through a scenario where you've used your data analytics or advanced data analytics, and it has led to a significant shift in your revenue management strategy and the way that you do things?
For sure. Yeah. I think one of the best examples is we have a really interesting blend of our property types. So we manage multiple areas across the coast. So all those markets, those beaches are different. They all have a different price point, a different clientele. But within that, we manage single family homes, individual condominiums, and complexes. And we have a few where we manage the complex. And so we have the vast majority of the properties. And so there's two, one of which we have about 180 properties, and it's 1 and 2 bedrooms are primarily. They're very similar floor plans. And we have another where they are all 2 bedrooms. It's about 80 properties. So it's the internal competition alone is very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Like cannibalize each other. But then we've also got to compete with everybody else in the building. So with our single family homes, they're unique. They all stand out. So we can kind of work on the revenue and always do something a little bit. But once you get in the groove and get some of your internal data, you can kind of really get comfortable, but not complacent. But with those buildings, it just is much more difficult to try and figure out how do you drive the most revenue for 100 properties that look kind of very similar. They sleep the same. They might be decorated differently. So what really helps, this is where the data, the tools, having good software like Key Data, Wheelhouse, who we use, and then combining all that with your manpower, your team's experience and brain power. I don't think you can ever forget that. You can't forget the power of your team looking at all this too. But being able to drive the most revenue to those individual properties when they're very similar, same building, same view, that's where really the revenue management tools, the data, combining all that has been the most effective. I think you could probably say, if you have one single family home somewhere, you could probably figure it out and do that pretty well, even if you had no tools and no data. With the big complex where you've got many properties and you got to figure out what tweaks do you make? How do you drive revenue, but also not get too low of a price point for an owner because they're all individuals. That's where it really, really has been helpful. You can look at who's performing well, why, what does the data say? What are the trends for these properties? Is it a certain floor? Is it a certain view? Is it a certain occupancy? Because it's not always what you think. It's not always the 2-bedroom outperforms the one, and it's that simple. It could be that our top performing 1-bedrooms can outperform our 2-bedrooms.
Depending on attributes too. Yeah.
That's right. So that's where it's really been to me the most helpful and effective, is to be able to take a huge amount of data for 180 properties, consolidate it, find trends, and then make rate adjustments for each individual one, because that's a big piece of the partnership. And what we owe our owners is to treat them individually. We don't want to treat them all the same and then leave money on the table for one. So a specific example would be at this one complex, we had a property, they call it coastline instead of Gulf front. So it kind of had an angle view to it instead of being directly full Gulf front. What performed better, the one on the coastline with different view performed better than the Gulf front. And so it was this thing where the perception was, why is this property doing better? The owners don't like that this one's doing better, which I totally get that. But it was an anomaly, but I can't have the coastline unit suffer because the Gulf front units aren't performing it the same way. The market's telling me something. And as much as I'd like for them all to book for $1,000 a night, the market's telling me and the data's telling me we just need to ride this property's performance and let it go. So it was interesting. That was a really interesting case because it hurts the owners say, well, I spent more on this property, and they're totally right. And my property should command a higher rate than this one. And in theory, they're absolutely right. But when the response and the bookings and the data tell me something different, we have to respond to that.
So why did the corner unit? Was it because it was a corner unit? Was it the description? Was it the pictures?
I think it was a really well done unit. So it had been recently renovated.
Okay.
And it was a top corner. So it was the 18th, I think it was very top right corner. And so I just think people found that particular view more appealing than the Gulf view, because you did look down the coast. It was pretty cool. And so I think the pictures certainly help. You could always say, pictures help. I think that's, like with your story, got to worry about the pictures. But it was unique. And so that's helpful. When you're in a crowded market space, you got to be unique in some way. And that one was unique.
You used a lot of very good software. I want you to tell me, Chris, your biggest pain point.
Biggest pain point.
You're going to wave a magic wand and say, if I had the technology that did X, Y, Z, it would make a difference in my business.
I think being able to aggregate all of our data more would be helpful. And then this will never exist because everybody's so different in the way they absorb data. But if I could take revenue data and automate it to be easily digested by property owners, that would be really helpful. But I don't know. That's impossible. That's a magic wand.
We have people working on that. That's a very important piece, to be able to explain the data in a way that not only the property owners understand, but they want to listen to and they want to have a head knowledge of. So yeah, I understand that.
They want it. They want the information. They want the data. I'm so guilty of this. I'll start putting it out there and they're like, whoa. I don't get, less information. So in a way, you could just automatically present it exactly how they would like to see. Not everybody learns and ingests information the same. And so, to be able to take what we see and the positives and the areas to improve and put it in front of them seamlessly, so that solves some of the heartache of they don't want to ask. And then they ask. And if the answer is not really what they were looking for, there's just this friction.
Yeah. What there needs to be at the end of that is, okay, so here's your data. Here's the recommendations. Now we're talking an easy automated report. Here's your data. Here's what you need to do, in our opinion. So yeah, definitely. That's a great one. Tell me this. I want to know your favorite property management story, whether it's about an owner or whether it's about a guest. Let's smile.
Yeah.
Or frown.
I know. Well, I think initial reaction is probably to tell like the nightmare story. Those are the more shocking ones. But I mean, there's so many cool things that happen.
Tell me the nightmare one. The nightmare one's good. I've got nightmare ones that have turned into hilarious stories.
Well, one of a simple one is I'll always remember the first agreement that I had signed. That was just a great validating moment. I'll always remember where I was, the owners, how nice they were. And it was just because it became real. There were months, really, it was working from scratch. I'd worked for big companies. And then the first contract was like, okay, this can work. We can do this. And, it's so funny still thinking about the way that I presented it, all the marketing materials, they were just awful, but they're super sweet people. They're a great family, signed up. They're still on the program, but that one will always be memorable to me. And there's just these little things. I have this one partner, he's got a condo, and we signed up an agreement where we had a tiered commission structure. And so our performance meant that we would get a higher commission. And he called 3/4 the way through the year. And he said, I'm just really happy. I'd like to raise the commission that we're paying you.
What?
And I said, I know, it's just unheard of. And he's just a great guy. He's the type where he'll call at 4:00 and he'll say, the day's almost over, so I'm not going to bother you for long. It's almost after business hours. Or he'll say, I know I need to do this to the property. But I have never heard that where someone's offered to pay a higher commission because they were happy. But he's just a great guy. So that was a really cool one. And then one thing I'll never forget too is my first daughter, she was born March 16th. And I got a call from an owner that their neighbor was complaining about their trash can being on the street. And I was the only one really who could go do it. So I said, all right, no problem. So I took everybody home and took the trash in, sent him a picture. I said, sorry for the delay. I was leaving the hospital. He was like, I didn't know that. I said, well, it's no big deal, but
Wow.
I would not recommend that. No one should do that, but don't forget.
I have to tell you, the person that called and offered you a higher commission, that speaks more to you personally. I'm going to be real honest. That speaks to you personally as much as it does anything. So congratulations for being very good at your job and being a kind person, Chris. Pays off to be honest and to be good at your job.
Yeah.
If people are interested in getting help from you, how would they reach you, Chris?
Phone, email, call, text, email, whichever works for them, works for me. You can email me at chris@scenicstays38.com. Phone number is 205-243-8169. But yeah, I'm happy to help.
So is there anything else you want to tell people, anything else you want to give, any advice you want to leave with? I mean, I usually ask people, what mistakes would you not do? But in this case, I really have enjoyed talking about the important pieces that people can use right now. But if there's anything else you want to say, I want to give you the floor to do it.
Well, I think the mistakes is important because you have to. You could always look back and wish they didn't happen, but you have to make mistakes. It's the most valuable teaching tool. And so if you don't have the room and the flexibility to make mistakes or to give your team that, you won't learn, or you'll always think you're doing it right. So I think that's important. There's a million, how much time you have for all the mistakes. And I'll make 1,000 more, but I think they're important. I think the biggest thing for us is just to care. It's an intangible. It's not data driven. You can't measure the care. You can try, but you've got to care about your team, your owners, your guests, and let that guide what you do. It's not always financially advantageous. It's not always going to get you the most flexible schedule, but I think it's the most important thing. That's an owner, guest, whoever asks about what makes us different. So, there's not a thing I could tell you we do perfectly or that much differently, but
no one does.
Yeah, it's all very similar. It really is. It's execution and it's care. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you don't care and feel and want to be driven to do better and more and provide those experiences, you're probably going to have a tough time. So you've got to care.
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you so much for being willing to share. Guys, if you want to know more about micro targeting, because he's talked a lot about that. He hasn't used those words, but he's talking about a lot of micro targeting expertise that he has. And a lot of the people that have come on this show have talked about, the specific difficulty in marketing for large condos, large communities that have the same type of unit. Chris does it right. So guys, if you're interested, please get in touch with him. And Chris, thanks again for being a part of the show. I'm grateful, and I know everybody else is going to be happy to listen to this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This episode of How We Grow is brought to you by LiveRes. To find out more about how LiveRes can help grow your vacation rental business, visit liveres.com. Make sure to search for How We Grow in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. On behalf of the team here at Inhabit, thanks for listening.